You have a valid passport. You have money to travel. But that's not enough to get into these 7 countries. In 2026, there are places on this planet where an American citizen cannot simply book a flight and show up. They need approval, sponsorship, or in one case, permission from the US government itself just to legally go. Some of these restrictions exist for political reasons, others for religious ones, and one of them, most Americans don't even know is technically off limits. Let's start with number 7. Number 7. Equatorial Guinea. Tucked along the west coast of Central Africa, Equatorial Guinea is one of the wealthiest countries per capita on the entire continent, thanks almost entirely to offshore oil discovered in the 1990s. But wealth hasn't translated into open borders. If anything, it's the opposite. On paper, the process looks manageable. Equatorial Guinea does offer an e-visa, and the government lists a straightforward set of requirements: a passport valid for at least 6 months, proof of sufficient funds, a yellow fever vaccination certificate, standard stuff you'd expect for several African nations. But buried in that list is the real obstacle: a confirmed invitation letter from a host inside the country, covering the applicant's entire stay. Without someone already living in Equatorial Guinea willing to vouch for you, a local sponsor, a registered tour operator, or a business entity, the application doesn't move forward at all. And if you're going for business instead of tourism, it gets even more specific. The invitation letter can't just come from anyone. It has to be printed on official company letterhead, addressed directly to the Equatorial Guinea Consulate's visa section, and signed by someone at the level of senior manager or above. Officials aren't just checking if you have a reason to visit. They're checking if someone inside the system is willing to take responsibility for you. For tourism applicants specifically, there's an added financial requirement most travelers don't expect: proof of at least $1,000 available for every month of the intended stay. Not just a general sufficient funds checkbox, but a hard number tied directly to how long you plan to be there. Here's what makes this country genuinely different from most hard-to-visit destinations, though: having every document, every letter, every dollar amount accounted for still isn't a guarantee. Applications can face delays or outright rejection, often without a clear explanation, and there's no appeals process that reliably works in a traveler's favor. Why so tightly controlled? It's not about protecting fragile tourism infrastructure. Equatorial Guinea barely has any. It's about control itself. The government has long kept a close watch on who enters and why, particularly journalists and researchers, in a country that's frequently been the subject of international scrutiny over governance and human rights. The result is one of the least visited nations on Earth, not because it's remote or geographically difficult to reach, but because completing the approval process is something most travelers never actually manage to do. Oh wait, before we continue, we'd love to hear from you. Did you agree with this video? What can you say about it? Leave a comment below and share your thoughts. Don't forget to tell us where you're from so we know how far our video has reached. Number 6. Nauru. Nauru is the 3rd smallest country in the entire world, a tiny Pacific island most people couldn't point to on a map. But despite its size, it's one of the hardest places on the planet to actually get into. There's no visa on arrival here, no online e-visa portal either. You have to contact Nauru's immigration office directly, 4 to 6 weeks before your trip, just to start the process. They'll send you an application form. You complete it along with supporting documents, and then you wait anywhere from 2 to 6 weeks for approval. Once approved, you receive what's called a letter of invitation, and that's your only ticket in. No LOI, no boarding pass, regardless of nationality. If someone shows up without a pre-approved LOI, they're put right back on the same plane they arrived on. And here's the number that really shows how exclusive this is. Only 200 to 300 tourists visit Nauru per year, fewer people than some countries see in a single hour. Why so strict? Part of it comes down to a mandatory sponsorship system. A local hotel or registered tour agency has to back your application before it's even considered. On top of that, flights to Nauru from Brisbane only run twice a week, so even once you're approved, actually getting there takes real planning. The result? a country where getting permission isn't even the finish line. Actually making it there is a challenge all its own. Number 5. Saudi Arabia. Here's a twist that surprises most travelers. Saudi Arabia isn't actually hard to visit anymore. The country opened up to international tourism a few years back, and Americans can now apply for a regular visa without much hassle at all. But two of its most important cities operate under an entirely different set of rules, and no visa changes that. Mecca is completely off limits to non-Muslims. Not difficult, not requires extra paperwork. Off limits, period. Highway signs on every approach to the city clearly direct non-Muslims to exit before reaching Mecca's boundaries, backed by checkpoints on every road leading in. There's no exception for curiosity, academic research, or journalism. If you're not Muslim, Mecca simply isn't on your itinerary. Attempting to enter anyway can result in fines, detention, and deportation, and enforcement isn't a formality. At checkpoints, officers check identification and visa type, since Hajj and Umrah visas indicate a traveler's religion, and non-Muslims are not eligible to apply for those visas at all. Medina, Islam's second holiest city, tells a different story, and it's a fairly recent one. Since 2023, non-Muslims have actually been allowed to walk the streets, eat in restaurants, stay in hotels, and explore Medina's historic districts. But there's still a hard boundary. The Prophet's Mosque and the sacred zones surrounding it remain completely restricted to non-Muslims, no matter how open the rest of the city has become. So this isn't a story about a difficult visa process. It's about a restriction that exists completely outside the visa system, where the real requirement for entry into two of the world's most significant cities isn't paperwork or money. It's faith itself. Number 4. Cuba. Just 90 miles from Florida, Cuba is actually easy for most of the world to visit. Nationals from 18 countries can travel there without a visa or tourist card at all. But the story is completely different for Americans. U.S. citizens are legally prohibited from traveling to Cuba purely for tourism or vacation. Instead, you have to qualify under one of 12 categories authorized by the U.S. government. Things like family visits, journalism, educational activities, or support for the Cuban people, which is one of the most commonly used categories among travelers. In other words, you can't just pick Cuba as a destination. You first have to justify a legal reason for going. And this isn't just a guideline, it's actual law. If your trip doesn't fall under any of those categories, you have to apply for a specific license directly from the Office of Foreign Assets Control, or OFAC. A process that's nowhere near as simple as a regular tourist visa. The rules have only tightened further heading into 2026. This past January, the U.S. government reinstated Cuba's designation as a state sponsor of terrorism, expanded what's known as the Cuba Restricted List, and in May added further sanctions targeting individuals connected to repression in the country. The result? It's not Cuba closing its doors on Americans. It's their own government deciding what counts as a legitimate reason to go. If you're enjoying this video, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and click the notification bell so you won't miss any of our future uploads. Also, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and let us know what you think about this topic. We're all ears. Number 3. Turkmenistan. Turkmenistan is widely considered one of the least visited countries on Earth, and once you understand the visa process, it's easy to see why. There's no such thing as walking up to an embassy and getting approved on the spot. Applicants need several documents just to start, including 3 copies of a fully completed visa application form. But the real bottleneck is the letter of invitation, a formal document issued by the Turkmen State Migration Service, and it can't just be requested directly. It has to be arranged through a local sponsor, usually a registered tour operator or a contact already living inside the country. And this isn't a quick formality. That invitation letter alone can take up to 20 days to process, before you've even submitted your actual visa application. Combine both steps, and travelers are often looking at weeks of lead time just to find out if they're approved. There's essentially no version of a spontaneous trip to Turkmenistan. Every step, the sponsor, The invitation, the paperwork, is tracked and pre-approved by the government before a traveler ever sets foot in the country. It's a system built less around convenience and more around control, reflecting just how closely Turkmenistan monitors who enters and why. The result? A country most travelers never even attempt to visit, not because it's unreachable, but because very few are willing to wait a month just for the chance to apply. Number 2. Bhutan. Bhutan is the Himalayan kingdom famous for measuring gross national happiness instead of GDP, and it's just as famous for running one of the most controlled tourism systems in the world. You can't just book a flight and show up. Every visitor is required to go through a licensed local tour operator, since the government mandates that this happens before a visa can even be issued. And before you can book anything, you're required to pay what's called the Sustainable Development Fee, a daily charge currently set at $100 per person per night. This fee doesn't cover hotels, meals, or guide services. It's completely separate, and it forms the financial backbone of Bhutan's entire tourism model. Back in 2022, that fee was actually $200 a night before it was cut in half to attract more visitors, but that lower rate is only locked in until August 2027, meaning it could rise again after that. Why so strict? Bhutan's government is committed to what it calls high-value, low-volume tourism, fewer tourists overall, but a bigger contribution from each one. The revenue from the SDF goes directly toward funding free healthcare, education, and preserving the country's environment and culture. The result? A country where getting a visa isn't the only requirement. You have to prove you're willing to pay the actual price of entry, literally, before you can even book the trip. Number 1. North Korea. This is the most extreme entry on the entire list. And here's the twist. It's not really about North Korea's rules. It's about America's. Since September 2017, the U.S. State Department has declared all U.S. passports invalid for travel to, in, or through North Korea. That means it isn't North Korea stopping Americans at the border. Legally, a standard American passport simply cannot be used to enter the country at all. The only way around it is something called a special validation passport, issued directly by the State Department, and it's granted only in extremely limited circumstances, typically reserved for journalists, Red Cross officials, humanitarian workers, or travel considered to be in the national interest. For nearly every American, none of those categories apply. This restriction wasn't random. It followed the death of American student Otto Warmbier, who was detained in North Korea for 17 months and returned to the U.S. in a coma in 2017. Since then, the ban has been renewed every single year. The current restriction runs through August 31, 2026, and is expected to be extended again. Attempting to travel there without that validation isn't just risky, it's a federal crime under U.S. law, layered on top of North Korea's own well-documented risks of arbitrary arrest and long-term detention, especially since there's no U.S. embassy inside the country to help if something goes wrong. So for the vast majority of Americans, this isn't a country that's simply hard to get into. It's a country their own government has made it illegal to attempt. From a passport that's completely banned, to a country where money alone won't get you in, to a fee you have to pay before you're even approved. These 7 countries prove that in 2026, having a U.S. passport doesn't mean the world is automatically open to you. Which one of these surprised you the most? Was it North Korea's outright ban, or Bhutan's daily price tag just to step inside? Let us know in the comments. We read every single one. If you enjoyed this video, do us a huge favor. Hit that like button, subscribe if you're new here, and click the notification bell so you don't miss the next one. We've got more videos like this coming very soon. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.